Will a fully realized adult Yuji surpass Gojo and Sukuna? Let's talk about it. Now, real quick before we dive in, I want to give a huge shout out to Aang who inspired this video. Thank you so much for the support, man. All right, so first of all, let's just set the stage and talk about the canvas that is Yuji Itadori's potential. And first and foremost, this man is built different. He was out here throwing cars before he ever even had a curse technique. Before honestly he even knew what cursed energy was, his strength and speed were on another level. It's basically akin to a heavenly restriction. Now, it's not literally one, but that's what you can compare him to. His just base stats are already off the charts. And in terms of talent, we know the thing that separates average sorcerers from extraordinary sorcerers is Black Flash. And Yuji is the Baron of Black Flash, the man chosen by the Black Sparks. It is confirmed that he will go on to destroy all of the current Black Flash records. And I mean, he even tied the consecutive Black Flash record moments after learning what Black Flash even was. Now, in the interest of laying everything out on the table, I do think it's worth mentioning that at least some portion of Yuji's talent or prowess as a sorcerer is thanks to Sukuna. Kusakabe brings this to our attention by mentioning that, Yuji has been Sukuna's vessel and his body has been soaked in Sukuna's special grade cursed energy. That has allowed him to pick up on this world of sorcery far faster than he would have otherwise. Also, just because I didn't mention it at the start of this video, spoilers beware from this point on. And then in addition to being Sukuna's vessel, we also know that Yuji is tangentially related to Sukuna and actually contains part of Sukuna's twin brother's soul, and part of that is why he was even able to be a vessel for Sukuna. And that's not to take anything away from Yuji himself. Again, I just want to lay all the cards out there. Everything we talked about so far has just been base Yuji. Now let's talk about everything he got toward the end of the series, starting with his first curse technique, blood manipulation, which he got from consuming his cursed womb death painting brothers. And we see him use this a little bit at the end of the series, but he's still getting the ropes of it. He hasn't mastered it by any means. He even needs Choso's help to do this piercing blood, but he has that curse technique. And of course, he also has Sukuna's curse technique, Shrine, which was also a byproduct of him being Sukuna's vessel. So this means that he has Sukuna's slashes, which we saw him do in the manga, but it also means he has Sukuna's furnace. And don't forget, he didn't just add curse techniques to his arsenal, he added a whole bunch, including the reverse curse technique, which he got largely thanks to his body swap training with Akotsu, something that was only possible because of Ui. And we'll talk more about that in a minute here. But you gotta remember that Akotsu is one of the best RCT users in the verse, so he had a hell of a teacher. And even beyond that, thanks to him having the blood manipulation curse technique, his RCT is easier compared to everyone else's. So not only is he just a physical tank to begin with in raw stats, but he heals easier than everyone else. And then also thanks to the body swap training, we know that Yuji now knows the new shadow style and can perform a simple domain. And just like with Akotsu, he learned this from the best possible teacher he could, Kusakabe, who is now the head of the new shadow style school. And then last but most certainly not least, we know that Yuji has a domain expansion, the crown jewel of Jujutsu sorcery, something that most sorcerers will never even come close to. This kid learned in under 2 years, and really in under a month after actually getting a curse technique. Okay, so that's where we're at with Yuji at the end of the series. And just to be clear, this version of Yuji is not even coming close to Gojo and Sukuna in my opinion. But this is just our launching point. Let's take this Yuji, but then give him 10 to 15 years to train to where he would be roughly the same age Gojo was, and I guess we could call it Sukuna, but Sukuna's kind of weird since he hibernated for 1,000 years. But the point is, he's just a kid, 15, 16 years old, right? And he's already doing all of this. Yuji at, let's just call it 16, is stronger than Gojo was at 16. Now, let's not get into the weeds on the Limitless and the Six Eyes, like necessarily verse this version of Yuji, but just his progress as a sorcerer is further than Gojo's was at that age. So now let's look at him at Gojo's age. Okay, so let's project all of this out, and we'll start with the physical stats. In this case, nothing's really going to change, right? Yuji already had the cheat code in terms of his base stats, and those aren't really going to increase by any meaningful amount over the next 10 years. He's already built different. Next, let's talk about Black Flash, and I think it's fair to say that Yuji is only going to get better and better at performing them. Now, will he ever truly reach a point where he can do it on command? I don't know, because it seems to be that that is impossible, but also Yuji, the Baron of Black Flash, seemed to be breaking that mold. And I don't think it's really worth getting into the distinction of if he can do it on command or not. Point is, he's doing it more than anyone else. We know he will break all of the records, and this is a huge deal because Black Flash, again, is like the most important thing for a sorcerer. It helps you ascend in your understanding of cursed energy, but it also replenishes you. It like gives you your energy and cursed energy output back, and also reduces that of your opponents. Maybe that's not fair to say like across the board. This was kind of a unique situation with the Megami Soul thing, but the point is it really weakens your opponents and it strengthens you, and he's the best at it. So even though he's not going to have a cursed energy pool as large as Sukuna's or as efficient as Gojo's, he has his own cheat code battery. Next, let's talk about Piercing Blood. We give Yuji 10 years with this, then he is going to master it. Yes, Choso is no longer around to help mentor him, but he still has Noritoshi Kamo to help guide him through understanding all of this. And Kamo is a great teacher by Yuji's own admission. Remember when I said Yuji's physical stats weren't really going to change? Well, I lied, because with a mastery of blood manipulation, they are. As Noritoshi Kamo points out here, body temperature, pulse rate, the number of red blood cells, blood composition, it's all under my control. So he can literally enhance his body's stats by manipulating his body chemistry. As Megami puts it, he's doping. Not only would he be faster and stronger thanks to blood manipulation, but he would have better defense as well thanks to flowing red scale. Arguably the most durable dude in the series, getting even more durable. And I already mentioned it, but let's just jump ahead to RCT, because 10 years with blood manipulation is going to make Yuji even more efficient at healing himself, which not only is just a general boost in all respects, but it also means he's going to be that much more lethal with blood manipulation, unlike somebody like Noritoshi Kamo who can't heal and has to carry blood around with him. Yuji's not going to have that problem. Now, before we move on to Shrine, I just realized I forgot to mention one of the most crucial parts of Yuji's bag, and that's the fact that he can perceive the contours of the soul, which means he can strike at his enemies' souls, doing even more damage. And not only that, because he's aware of the shape of his own soul, he can heal his own soul damage. He's one of only 2 characters that we've ever seen capable of that. I'm not saying that others aren't capable of it, but still, he is in rarefied air. And I'm sure I'm just beating a dead horse by now, but I feel like I gotta point out that Yuji, with less than a month of experience with RCT, was already capable of healing grievous injuries like these. So now imagine 10 years of honing that skill. Alright, so now let's talk about Shrine. And it's certainly not the most powerful technique in the world like the Limitless is, but Sukuna showed us that in the right hands, it can be devastatingly effective, right? You've got range, which Yuji doesn't even need because he's got blood manipulation, but you've also got lethal close range with the cleave, or in Yuji's case, the soul dismantle, which he used a binding vow to perform. And also the fact that Yuji already used that kind of sophisticated binding vow to combine a curse technique he just awakened with his soul perception abilities to help cleave at the soul between Sukuna and Megami is crazy impressive and speaks to his talent, right? But the point is, that was immediately awakening it. Now let's imagine him 10 years in the future, where he will not only probably develop his own versions of this further. You know, again, we only saw him use dismantle. Maybe he'll develop his own version of cleave, or maybe he'll develop something entirely else with the slashes with his own binding vows, right? But even more interesting to me than that would be Yuji developing his own version of the fire arrow. And we know in Sukuna's case, he had a lot of binding vows surrounding this by using it in conjunction with his domain versus not and all that jazz, right? So Yuji's may look nothing like this, but we know that the Shrine Curse technique has this open furnace capability, right? So Yuji will be able to add that to his arsenal in a way that he sees appropriate. So now let's talk about the domain expansion. And first of all, Yuji has 2 curse techniques, which means he could theoretically imbue either one into the barrier of his domain to solve whatever problem was thrown at him in any specific situation. You know, maybe it's blood manipulation for this, maybe it's Shrine for that. And we get to see his domain in the manga, but that's literally the first time he ever does it. Just imagine 10 years of perfecting that thrown on top. what is he going to be capable of? And we don't have any hard, like, canonical evidence of this yet, but for my money, we saw Yuji already do a pretty complicated binding vow in his first domain with that walk down memory lane and the pacifist no violence condition that was first there, which then was lifted and I'm assuming would increase his damage because of that binding vow. But the point is, 10 years more of perfecting and experimenting, it's going to be dangerous. And speaking of barrier techniques, just think about how much more refined Yuji's going to be after spending 10 years with the new shadow style, especially if Kusakabe continues to be the one to show him the ropes, which I don't know why he wouldn't be the one, right? Especially as the new head of the new shadow style school. So not only will Yuji's simple domain be far more potent and far more capable to defend against other people's domains, but he'll also be able to use it offensively by, I'm sure, learning from some of the binding vows that Kusakabe implements into his simple domain. But even on top of that, Yuji will also undoubtedly learn domain amplification, which will allow him to negate other people's curse techniques should that need ever arise. So everything we've talked about so far, I consider to be a given. Yuji will experience that type of growth over the next 10 years. But now let's talk about a big what if. What if they continue to utilize Ui's swap training? Because we know in the month leading up to the Sukuna fight, when they were doing that, they all grew exponentially. So imagine that that's just a regular thing, right? Yuji is swapping with Akotsu and learning from him, swapping with Megami, with Todo. The list goes on and on. All of their growth rates would just be off the charts exponential. Now, we have no guarantee that that will be a thing. Maybe it would be a thing if there was ever like an emergency similar to the Sukuna situation, because Ui and Mei are very strange, right? I think at least, and this is something Aang brought up, maybe they could pay them to do it. And with Akotsu's money, especially as the future head of the Gojo clan or one of the heads, they've probably got the funds. So I don't think we can for sure say that this would take place over the, hypothetical next 10 years, but it's at least possible. And if it is, like, good lord, they're getting powerful. But even without the swap training, just the sparring partners Yuji has at his disposal are going to help him grow exponentially. This is something that neither Gojo or Sukuna ever had. We know in Sukuna's case, he got so bored in his own era that he took a 1,000-year nap hoping to find some strong people when he woke up. And in Gojo's case, after he awakened, he didn't have any challenges to help him hone his strength. It wasn't really until the Sukuna fight that he really got to test himself. Imagine if either of them had peers that they could train with every day, how much stronger those anomalies would be than they even are. I mean, seriously, let's just take a look at the stable of opponents here. We've got Akotsu, the special grade genius with the Queen of Curses and a grab bag of curse techniques in his arsenal to throw at Yuji. We've got Maki, who is the only person on par with Yuji's physical stats and can test him in that realm. And we've got Hikari, who is virtually unkillable. Like, how nice will that be if you're really trying to test yourself going all out? So now to circle back around to the original premise, I think an adult, fully realized Yuji is an absolute demon who is going to be stronger than both Gojo and Sukuna. But I do have some important clarifications on that statement. I think these two are the most talented Jujutsu sorcerers to ever exist, and I do not think Yuji will surpass them in that metric. He is not going to be as skilled with Jujutsu or as much of a genius in how he utilizes it compared to these two, but he will be stronger than them. It's the inevitable march of human progress, right? Take any athletic competition or sport and compare the modern day athlete to the ancient one. There's going to be no competition there, right? And this is obviously an exaggerated example. This is multiple generations. And, between Gojo and Sukuna and Yuji, there's only one generation, minus any weirdness with Sukuna's hibernation. Y'all get the point. So it's not going to be that drastic of a jump, but I still think there's a jump. I mean, that was Gojo's entire purpose, right? To curate this next generation to even surpass him. And I think they will. I think Yuji will be stronger than both of them. But again, not more talented. So in the hypothetical world where we could pluck Gojo or Sukuna's consciousness out and put it into a fully realized Yuji's body, I do think that they would be more capable in piloting that car, if that makes sense. But yeah, I do think Yuji will ultimately surpass them. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Be sure to let me know all y'all's thoughts down in the comments because I would love to hear what you guys think about all of this. And I want to give another huge shout out to Aang for inspiring this video because it was really fun to get into another longer, in-depth JJK video. It's been a minute.